The Merchant of Venice, a legend of Italy. Richard Harris Barham. I believe there are few but have heard of a Jew, named Shylock, of Venice, as errant a screw in money transactions as ever you knew. An exorbitant miser, who never yet lent a ducat at less than 300%. Insomuch that the veriest spendthrift in Venice, who'd take no more care of his pounds than his pennies, when pressed for a loan, at the very first sight of his terms, would back out, and take refuge in flight. It is not my purpose to pause and inquire if he might not, in managing thus to retire, jump out of the frying pan into the fire. Suffice it, that folks would have nothing to do, who could possibly help it, with Shylock the Jew. But, however discreetly one cuts and contrives, we've been most of us taught in the course of our lives, that needs must when the elderly gentleman drives. In proof of this rule, a thoughtless young fool, Bassanio, a lord of the Tom Naughty school, who, by showing at operas, balls, plays, and court, a swelling, plain collier would read swilling port, and inviting his friends to dine, breakfast, and sup, had shrunk his weak means, and was stumped, and hard up, took occasion to send to his very good friend Antonio, a merchant whose wealth had no end, and who'd often before had the kindness to lend him large sums, on his note, which he'd managed to spend. "Antonio," said he, "no, listen to me. I've just hit on a scheme which, I think you'll agree, all matters considered, is no bad design, and which, if it succeeds, will suit your book and mine. In the first place, you know all the money I've got, time and often, from you has been long gone to pot, and making those loans you have made a bad shot. Now do as the boys do when, shooting at sparrows and tomtits, they chance to lose one of their arrows, shoot another the same way. I'll watch well its track, and, turtle to tripe, I'll bring both of them back. So list to my plan, and do what you can, to attend to and second it, that's a good man. There's a lady, young, handsome, beyond all compare, at a place they call Belmont, whom, when I was there, at the suppers and parties my friend Lord Montferrat was giving last season, we all used to stare at. Then, as to her wealth, her solicitor told mine, besides vast estates, a pearl fishery, and gold mine, her iron strong box seems bursting its locks, it's stuffed so with shares and grand junctions, and auks, not to speak of the monies she's got in the stocks, French, Dutch, and Brazilian, Colombian, and Chilean, and English exchequer bills full 500,000, not heights, manufactured to Cheaton and Vigo, but the right sort of flimsy, all signed by Monteagle. Then I know not how much in canal shares and railways and more speculations I need not detail, ways of vesting which, if not so safe as some think 'em, contribute a deal to improving one's income. In short, she's a mint. Now I say, deuces in single quote if with all my experience, I can't take a hint, and her eyes speechless messages, plainer than print at the time that I told you of, no from a squint. In short, my dear Tony, my trusty old crony, do stump up 3,000 once more as a loan. I am sure of my game, though, of course there are brutes, of all sorts and sizes, preferring their suits to her you may call the Italian Miss Coutts, yet Portia she's named from that daughter of Cato's is not to be snapped up like little potatoes, and I have not a doubt I shall rout every lout or you'll whisper Jack Robinson cut them all out, surmount every barrier, carry her, marry her. Then hey, my old Tony, when once fairly noosed, for her 3.5% new and reduced. With a wink of his eye his friend made reply in his jocular manner, sly, caustic, and dry. Still the same boy, Bassanio never say die. Well, I hardly know how I shall do single quote but I'll try. Don't suppose my affairs are at all in a hash, but the fact is, at present I'm quite out of cash. The bulk of my property, merged in rich cargoes, is tossing about, as you know, in my argosies, tending, of course, my resources to cripple. I've one bound to England, another to Tripoli, Cyprus, Masulipatam and Bombay. A sixth, by the way, I consigned t'other day to Sir Gregor M. Gregor, cacique of Poitiers, a country where silver's as common as clay. Meantime, till they tack, and come, some of them, back, what with custom house duties, and bills falling due, My account with Jones Lloyd and Company looks rather blue. While, as for the ready, I'm like a church mouse, I really don't think there's £5 in the house. But, no matter for that, let me just get my hat, and my new silk umbrella that stands on the mat, and we'll go forth at once to the market we two, and try what my credit in Venice can do. I stand well on change, and, when all's said and done, I don't doubt I shall get it for love or for money. They were going to go, when, lo! Down below, in the street, they heard somebody crying, "Old Clo! Be the Pope, there's the man for our purpose." I knew we should not have to search long. Saldanio, run you, Salarino, quick! Haste! Ere he get out of view, and call in that scoundrel, old Shylock the Jew. With a pack, like a sack of old clothes at his back, and 3 hats on his head, Shylock came in a crack, saying, "Rist you fair, Signor Antonio. Vat, pray, might your worship be pleased for to vent in ma way?" "We, Shylock, although, as you very well know, I am what they call warm, pay my way as I go, and, as to myself, neither borrow nor lend, I can break through a rule to oblige an old friend. And that's the case now. Lord Bassanio would raise some 3,000 ducats well, knowing your ways, and that not's to be got from you, say what one will, unless you've a couple of names to the bill. Why, for once, I'll put mine to it, yea, seal and sign to it now." "Then, old sinner, let's hear what you'll say as to doing a bill at 3 months from today. 3,000 gold ducats, mind all in good bags of hard money, no sealing wax, slippers, or rags." "Vul, martyr," says the Jew, "I'll see vat I can do. But Mr. Antonio, hark you, 'tish funny you say to me, Shylock, martyr, ve'd have money. Ven you very well knows, how you spit on my clothes, and use naughty words, call me dog, and avouch that I put too much in rushed pie half in my pouch, and vil I, like de rest of my tribe, shrug and crouch, you find fault mit my pargins, and say I'm a smouch. Vil. In no matters, martyr, von word in your ear. I'd be friends mit you bought and to make dat appear, I'll find you de monies as soon as you will, only von little joke must be put in de pill. Mater, you must say, if on such and such day such sum or such sums, you shall fail to repay, I shall cut vira like, as de pargon is broke, a fair pound of your flesh chest by way of a joke." So novel a clause caused Bassanio to pause. But Antonio, like most of those sage Johnny Raws who care not 3 straws about lawyers or laws, and think cheaply of old Father Antic, because they have never experienced a gripe from his clause, pooh-poohed single quote the whole thing. Let the smouch of his way. Why, what care I, pray, for his penalty? Nay, it's a forfeit he'd never expect me to pay, and, come what come may, I hardly need say my ships will be back a full month ere the day. So, anxious to see his friend off on his journey, and thinking the whole but a paltry concern, he affixed with all speed his name to a deed, duly stamped and drawn up by a sharp Jew attorney. Thus again furnished forth, Lord Bassanio, instead of squandering the cash, after giving one spread, with fiddling and masks, at the Saracen's Head, in the morning made play, and without more delay, started off in the steamboat for Belmont next day. But scarcely had he from the harbor got free, and left the lagoons for the broad open sea, the Change and Rialto both rung with the news that he'd carried off more than mere cash from the Jews. Though Shylock was old, and, if rolling in gold, was as ugly a dog as yo wish to behold, for few in his tribe mongst their Levis and Moseses, sported so Jewish an eye, beard, and nose as his, still, whate'er the opinion of Horace and some be, your Aquila generate sometimes Columba, like Jephthah, as Hamlet says, he'd one fair daughter, and every gallant, who caught sight of her, thought her, a jewel, a gem of the very first water. A great many sought her, till one at last caught her, and, upsetting all that the rabbis had taught her, to feelings so truly reciprocal brought her, that the very same night Bassanio thought right to give all his old friends that farewell invite. And while Shylock was gone there to feed out of spite, on wings made by a tailor the damsel took flight. By these wings I'd express a grey duffel dress, with brass badge and muffin cap, made, as by rule, for an upper-class boy in the national school. Jessie ransacked the house, popped her breeks on, and when so disguised, bolted off with her beau one Lorenzo, an unthrift, who lost not a moment in whisking her into the boat, and was fairly afloat ere her pa had got rid of the smell of the griskin. Next day, while old Shylock was making a racket, and threatening how well he'd dust every man's jacket who'd helped her in getting aboard of the packet, Bassanio at Belmont was capering and prancing, and bowing, and scraping, and singing, and dancing, making eyes at Miss Portia, and doing his best to perform the polite, and to cut out the rest. And, if left to herself, he, no doubt, had succeeded, for none of them waltzed so genteelly as he did. But an obstacle lay, of some weight, in his way. The defunct Mr. P., who is now turned to clay, had been an odd man, and, though all for the best he meant, left but a queer sort of last will and testament, bequeathing her hand, with her houses and land, ampersand up. C. From motives one don't understand, as she reverenced his memory, and valued his blessing, to him who should turn out the best hand at guessing. Like a good girl, she did just what she was bid. In one of 3 caskets her picture she hid, and clapped a conundrum atop of each lid. A couple of princes, a black and a white one, tried first, but they both failed in choosing the right one. Another from Naples, who shoed his own horses. A French lord, whose graces might vie with Count d'Orsay's. A young English baron. A Scotch peer his neighbor. A dull drunken Saxon, all mustache and sabre. All followed, and all had their pains for their labor. Bassanio came last, happy man be his dole. Put his conjuring cap on, considered the whole, the gold put aside as mere hard food for Armidas, the silver bade trudge as a poor common drudge. Then choosing the little lead box in the middle, came plump on the picture, and found out the riddle. Now, you're not such a goose as to think, I dare say, gentle reader, that all this was done in a day, any more than the dome of St. Peter's at Rome was built in the same space of time. And, in fact, whilst Bassanio was doing his billing and cooing, 3 months had gone by ere he reached the 5th act. Meanwhile that unfortunate bill became due, which his lordship had almost forgot, to the Jew, and Antonio grew in a deuce of a stew, for he could not cash up, spite of all he could do. The bitter old Israelite would not renew, what with contrary winds, storms, wrecks, and embargoes, his funds were all stopped, or gone down in his argosies, none of the set having come into port, and Shylock's attorney was moving the court for the forfeit supposed to be set down in sport. The serious news of this step of the Jew's, and his fixed resolution all terms to refuse, gave the newly made bridegroom a fit of the blues, especially, too, as it came from the pen of his poor friend himself on the wedding day. Then, when the parson had scarce shut his book up, and when the clerk was yet uttering the final amen. Dear friend, it continued, all's up with me, I have nothing on earth now to do but to die. And, as death clears all scores, you're no longer my debtor. I should take it as kind could you come, never mind if your love don't persuade you, why, don't let this letter. I hardly need say this was scarcely read o'er a post-chaise, and for was brought round to the door, and Bassanio, though, doubtless, he thought it a bore, gave his lady one kiss, and then started at score. But scarce in his flight had he got out of sight ere Portia, addressing a groom, said, My lad, you a journey must take on the instant to Padua. Find out there Bilario, a doctor of laws, who, like Follett, is never left out of a cause, and give him this note, which I've hastily wrote. Take the papers he'll give you, then push for the ferry below, where I'll meet you. You'll do single quotee in a wherry. If you can't find a boat on the Brenta with sails to its day, bring his gown too, and wig with 3 tails to it. Giovanni, that's Jack, brought out his hack, made a bow to his mistress, then jumped on its back, put his hand to his hat, and was off in a crack. The Signora soon followed herself, taking as her own escort Nerissa her maid, and Balthasar. The court is prepared, the lawyers are met, the judges all ranged, a terrible show. As Captain Masheath says, and when one's in debt, the sight's as unpleasant a one as I know, yet still not so bad after all, I suppose, as if, when one cannot discharge what one owes, they should bid people cut off one's toes or one's nose. Yet here, a worse fate, stands Antonio, of late a merchant, might vie with princes and state, with his waistcoat unbuttoned, prepared for the knife, which, in taking a pound of flesh, must take his life. On the other side Shylock, his bag on the floor, and 3 shocking bad hats on his head, as before. Imperator Babel stands, as he waits their commands with his scales and his great snickersnee in his hands, between them, equipped in a wig, gown and bands, with a very smooth face, a young dandified lawyer, whose air, and nevertheless, speaks him quite a top-sawyer, though his hopes are but feeble, does his possible to make the hard Hebrew to mercy incline, and in lieu of his 3,000 ducats take 9, which Bassanio, for reasons we well may divine, shows in so many bags are drawn up in a line. But vain are all efforts to soften him. Still he points to the bond he so often has conned, and says in plain terms he'll be shot if he will. So the dandified lawyer, with talking grown hoarse, says, I can say no more, let the law take its course. Just fancy the gleam of the eye of the Jew, as he sharpened his knife on the sole of his shoe from the toe to the heel, and grasping the steel, with a businesslike air was beginning to feel whereabouts he should cut, as a butcher would veal, when the dandified judge puts a spoke in his wheel. Stay, Shylock, says he, here's one thing you see, this bond of yours gives you here no jot of blood. The words are a pound of flesh, that's clear as mud, slice away, then, old fellow, but mind. If you spill 1 drop of his claret that's not in your bill, I'll hang you, like Haman. By jingo I will. When apprised of this flaw, you never yet saw such an awfully marked elongation of jaw as in Shylock, who cried, Plesh my heart. Ish dat law. Off went his 3 hats, and he looked as the cats do, where never a mouse has escaped from their claw. Ish single quotee the law. Why, the thing won't admit of a query, no doubt of the fact, only look at the act. Acto quinto, cap. Tertio, doggy filirine, if, rather than cut, you'd relinquish the debt, the law, Master Shy, has a hold on you yet. See Foscari's statutes at large. If a stranger a citizen's life shall, with malice, endanger, the whole of his property, little or great, shall go, on conviction, 1/2 to the state, and 1 to the person pursued by his hate. And, not to create any farther debate, the Doge, if he pleases, may cut off his pate. So down on your marobons, Jew, and ask mercy. Defendant and plaintiff are now wissy-worsy. What need to declare how pleased they all were at so joyful an end to so sad an affair? Or Bassanio's delight at the turn things had taken, his friend having saved, to the letter, his bacon? How Shylock got shaved, and turned Christian, though late, to save a life interest in half his estate? How the dandified lawyer, who'd managed the thing, would not take any fee for his pains but a ring which Mrs. Bassanio had given to her spouse, with injunctions to keep it on leaving the house? How when he, and the spark who appeared as his clerk, had thrown off their wigs, and their gowns, and their jetty coats, there stood Nerissa and Portia in petticoats. How they pouted, and flouted, and acted the cruel, because Lord Bassanio had not kept his jewel. How they scolded and broke out, till having their joke out, they kissed, and were friends, and, all blessing and blessed, drove home by the light of a moonshiny night, like the one in which Troilus, the brave Trojan knight, sat astride on a wall, and sighed after his caressed. All this, if 'twere meet, I'd go on to repeat, but a story spun out so's by no means a treat, so, I'll merely relate what, in spite of the pains I have taken to rummage among his remains, no edition of Shakespeare, I've met with, contains. But, if the account which I've heard be the true one, we shall have it, no doubt, before long, in a new one. Inanimous, then sold for its full weight in gold, and knocked down to my friend, Lord Tom Noddy. I'm told it's recorded that Jessie, coquettish and vain, gave her husband, Lorenzo, a good deal of pain. Being mildly rebuked, she levanted again, ran away with the Scotchman, and, crossing the main, became known by the name of the Flower of Dumlan. That Antonio, whose piety caused, as we've seen, him to spit upon every old Jew's gabardine, and whose goodness to paint all colors were faint, acquired the well-merited prefix of saint, and the Doge, his admirer, of honor the found, having given him a patent, and made him a count. He went over to England, got naturalized there, and espoused a rich heiress in Hanover Square. That Shylock came with him. No longer a Jew, but converted, I think may be possibly true, but that Walpole, as these self-same papers aver, by changing the Y in his name into er, should allow him a fictitious surname to dish up, and in 1728 make him a bishop, I cannot believe you shall still think them two men till some sage proves the fact with his usual acumen. Moral. From this tale of the bard it's uncommonly hard if an editor can't draw a moral. 'Tis clear, then, in every young wife seeking bachelor's era maxim, above all other stories, this one drums, pitch Greek to old Harry, and stick to conundrums. To new married ladies this lesson it teaches, your and quo. Know that far wrong and quo. In assuming the breeches. Moneyed men upon change, and rich merchants at schools, to look well to assets no play with edge tools. Last of all, this remarkable history shows men, what caution they need when they deal with old clothsmen. So bid John and Mary to mind and be wary, and never let one of them come down the